Welcome, everyone. I'm Luna Goldberg, the Education Manager at the Jewish Museum of Florida, FIU. On behalf of the Jewish Museum of Florida, FIU, it's my pleasure to welcome you to the first fall program in our Be Well, a Wellness Program series. Tonight's program, Stressed Out, Mind-Body Approaches to Changing How You Feel, features Jason Wasser, a licensed marriage and family therapist, alternative medicine practitioner, certified entrepreneur coach, and speaker. He's the founder and clinical director of the Family Room Wellness Associates, a mind-body integrative health-focused practice in Hollywood, Florida. This evening's program is sponsored by the Greater Miami Jewish Federation's Incubator Grant and co-presented with the Stephen J. Green School of International and Public Affairs at FIU. Throughout tonight's program, members of the audience are encouraged to post questions to the chat or raise your hand if a question comes up as we go, and we'll stop for questions, but we'll also save some time at the end of the program. Without further ado, please join me in welcoming Jason Wasser.
Hello, can everybody hear me? Just give me a nod. For those of you who are on actual video, you can hear me good. All right, well, welcome. This is incredibly exciting. I just got back from an incredible week in Sedona, Arizona, where the whole theme of what we're talking about tonight, I spent a weekend, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, doing a workshop on this modality called neuro-emotional technique, which is going to be what our topic's going to be about tonight, and mind-body stress and handling things, especially during these challenging and difficult times. But before we do all that, before we start talking about all the things we want to accomplish, you know, we should sing a little bit together and kind of set the mood, set the vibe. And you know, we're in a time where there's a lot of difficulty, a lot of stress, a lot of fighting. So, you know, probably the best song that I can think of to start off with, that most of you, if not all of you, know. And if you don't know the words, just hum along and sing along. It's Ojevo Shalom, may there be peace among us. So, you know, if you just want to sit and listen, if you want to sing along, if you want to meditate, if you just want to just get into the evening at 7 o'clock and just be present with us, we'll sing for a minute or so just to kind of set our intention for the evening. But welcome, super excited to be here. Ojevo Shalom Aleinu, 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 ve'yagulam. Ojevo Shalom Aleinu, Ojevo Shalom Aleinu, Ojevo Shalom Aleinu, ve'yagulam. Shalom Aleinu ve'yagulam. Shalom, Shalom, Shalom. Shalom, Shalom, Ojevo Shalom Aleinu, Ojevo Shalom Aleinu, Ojevo Shalom Aleinu, ve'yagulam. Ojevo Shalom Aleinu, Ojevo Shalom Aleinu, Ojevo Shalom Aleinu ve'avulam. Shalom Aleinu ve'al kol ha'olam. Shalom, shalom, shalom Aleinu ve'al kol ha'olam. Shalom, shalom. Ojeva shalom aleinu. Ojeva shalom aleinu. Ojeva shalom aleinu. Ve'al kol ha'olam. All right. Well, welcome everybody. So, I'm Jason Wasser, and I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist. We're going to get into all of that, but tonight's topic is about being stressed. And too many krechs, too many oys, too many what the heck is going on in this world. And one of my missions as a therapist and as a coach is to help minimize stress and maximize potential. And that's what we're going to be talking about tonight. And if you're just joining us, it would make me incredibly happy if I can see your punim. I would love to see everybody's here. You don't have to hang out in the background. You can throw your cameras on. Everybody can connect. It's a time of we need to connect. I know we're craving that connection with all this stuff going on. So please feel free to jump on camera. It'll make me happy. It'll make me feel like I'm actually talking and connecting to people. So let's jump in a little bit. So you're going to see a little presentation, and hopefully at any point, if there's any questions, Luna, do you want to kind of explain that and give them the rundown on that?
Yeah. So everyone, we're going to take questions as we go. We have a lot of information that Jason has put together for us. So if something comes up, feel free to drop it in the chat. Feel free to raise your hand. At the bottom of your screen, you'll see something called reactions. And if you click that, you'll see a function that says raise hand. If that's too complicated, then you can turn your camera on and also raise your hand. And Jason will be happy to hear from you.
Absolutely. So for many times, so give me, by those of you who are here and you can see me or I can see you, or if you want to raise your digital virtual hand, who has heard or practiced the term mindfulness? Yeah. Okay. So it's kind of become this really awesome buzzword over the last many years. And, it's a powerful thing, and there's so many different topics and so many different ways to actualize it. And, we in our tradition, we've been hitting up mindfulness for so long. And the word that we use in Judaism for mindfulness, who can, if you want to type it into the chat, what's one of the words? And we're talking about being mindful and being intentional in the world of Jewish thought and the world of Jewish practice. If you want to type it into the chat, or if you want to quickly unmute yourself and just throw that word out, being intentional and being mindful. Does anybody have a guess? All right, Esther, what do you got for us?
Kavanagh?
Kavanagh. Yeah. So this is kind of our thing, right? We're the, we didn't need to go over to in the 60s and 70s focus. Thanks, Nora, right? We didn't need to go over to these ashrams in 60s and 70s, although it kind of really helped enrich us and bring back contemplation and meditation and stuff that we kind of lost meaning about, in Judaism. And, those of you who are familiar with Shlomo Carlebach and Reb Zalman, Shachter Shalami, and all those awesome New Age Jews that kind of brought all this intentionality and spirituality back into more normative or mainstream Judaism. And now in 2021, 2022, whatever year we're in, I've given up on keeping track, we can imbue this into our lives. And it really tracing it back to Kabbalah and Hasidic thought and all these things. This is ours. This is authentically our tradition. So when I realize the work I'm doing as a therapist and as an integrative mind-body specialist, I can trace it back to us. I can trace it back to our culture and our heritage. So I wanted to share some of the cool things tonight, more from the science and the practical side, that by the end of today's conversation, you will be able to take into your life. Because I don't want it to be too heady. And I don't want it to be too much action steps, especially since it's Tuesday night at 7 o'clock and, it's almost that midweek. But let's get started. And then, like I said, if you have questions, feel free to put it in the chat. If you're like really stuck and I totally lost you, just, unmute yourself and say, hey, Jason, and keep it to 15 seconds. Make yourself, I know us Jews like to talk. You have 15 seconds, which I know is impossible. What's that joke about, if it takes longer than 18 seconds, it turns to chametz? So let's keep it with that. All right. Let me get a screen share up here. Cool. Everybody got this? Give me a nod. Awesome. All right. So stressed. That's the name of the topic. Everything you need to know to be a more successful and happy person, right? To have more simcha, to have more joy in your life. So we started off with some music, and I've been playing music since I was 3 years old, because what Jewish kid who doesn't have a Jewish mother sticking a musical instrument in front of them when they're really young? I started off with a violin and eventually moved into other instruments. So I don't know if my mom's on yet, but if she jumps on later, tell her you should have nachas. So everybody do this. If you please humor me. Allow yourself to get as comfortable as you possibly can in your chair. Now I'm going to challenge you not to fall asleep. So if I hear any snoring, we're going to call you out. All right? Actually, you're muted. So let's take a minute. And for those of us who don't have our schnozzes fully congested from all the dairy we eat, try to take some nice, slow, deep breaths in through your nose. Hold it for a few seconds and let it out through your mouth. And what I want you to do is place your feet, the bottom of your feet, on the floor, so they're kind of planted and rooted. Nice, slow, deep breaths. In through your nose and out through your mouth. And if you'd like, you don't have to, but if you feel comfortable, you can close your eyes. And I want you to imagine that breath is drawing all the way up from the base of your feet. And when you're breathing in, you're pulling through all the way up your legs, your thighs, your low back, your shoulders, your neck, and you're breathing out. You're breathing in, you're pulling it up all the way through the top of your head. And when you're breathing out, it's the reverse flow. Even though you know you're breathing out through your nose, but it's coming directly back down. And take a few moments and notice any discomfort anywhere in your body. And as you're going up and in, allow your breath to focus there, as if you're now moving your breath as your starting point. So if you're starting off with your feet and your feet are okay, and you move up to your knees and your knees are, they need some attention. Just focus your breath there, as if you're breathing in through your knees all the way up. And when you're breathing out, you're pulling it back down through your head and you're breathing out through your knees. And if it's your low back, same thing. Breathe in through your low back and out as it circles back through. And the breathing in and the breathing out, whatever count feels comfortable for you. There's no one right way to do this. It's all about comfort, and it's all about non-judgment. But we're Jews, so suspend the judgment for a second. In through your nose, out through your mouth. And continue working your way up your body till you get to your ears, all the way up to the tip-top center point in your head. And it doesn't have to be perfect. It's just that simple noticing of an area that just needs some extra love and some extra attention. And just breathe through that. And take all of the time that you need in the next 15 seconds to work through all those spots. So as you return back to the room, as you return back to our thoughts, let's get a little bit deeper. So if you're just joining us, please make sure you're muted. And if you really would love to, I'd love to see everybody's faces. If you want to put your camera on, that'll be amazing. So I'm Jason Wasser. I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist. I'm also a mind-body integrative wellness expert. That's kind of what I've stumbled into. Didn't think I'd be into this, what we used to call this hippy-dippy stuff. Turns out it's all clinically researched and journal published. Go figure. So I started off down my journey doing hypnotherapy. And one of my professors at Nova Southeastern was this like guru hypnotherapist. And I fell in love with this whole mind-body thing. And what I found over the years was hypnosis is incredible, but it took way too long. And about 10 or so years ago, I started having panic attacks. I was actually going through a very difficult time in my life, and nothing I tried worked to get rid of my panic attacks. Went to my acupuncturist. He's awesome. Nice Chabad guy. Did herbs. I did meditation. Even went to my buddy who's a neurologist. Nice Jewish doctor. Did some of that stuff. Nothing got rid of my panic attacks. And then a friend of mine told me to go meet with this colleague who happened to be this neuro-emotional technique practitioner. And within 3 sessions of doing this work, which we're going to get into later, my panic attacks went away. No medication, no herbs, no drugs, all natural approach. So as you can see from the things that are really important to me, it's this mind-body personal growth, personal development. I added on sports psychology and entrepreneur and business coaching, and I work a lot with addictions, and that could be everything from challah and lox and bagels to all the other stuff that we shouldn't be getting into our life. So let's start off with this awesome quote. John Kabat-Zinn: "Mindfulness is the awareness that arises when paying attention on purpose with kavana in the present moment without judgment." So you heard me being playful before when we were doing the meditation. I'm like, wait, we're Jews. How can we not be judgmental for 2 seconds, right? But this is what it is, right? It's kavana. It's on purpose. So let's do this. So take a moment right now, and sorry, my computer is acting up, and I want you to think about 5 things that you are mindful about in your life right now. And just list those in your mind. I'm sorry, I'm having some technical stuff here. There we go. So let's talk neuroscience. So we're 5 times as likely to focus on negative thoughts than our positive thoughts. So this is kind of a fight or flight reflex. Right? When we think about things, we usually go into this, oh my gosh, what's going to happen? That nervousness, that are we going to be okay? Especially with everything going on right now. And really that's like our programming of our brain. So we're 5 times as likely, and just keep that fact, kind of in mind for everything. So let's understand a little bit about how this works, how we're kind of created, and why this makes sense. So this is an image of our brain. And we have 3 parts. And this idea of a triune brain theory really makes sense because what we are connected with all creations in the world is this lizard brain. This is our brain stem. This is our, that part of the brain. And that's responsible for fight or flight. That's the survival instinct. That's the me, not the we part of our brain. And that puts us in autopilot. And then we have this mammalian brain, and that's the seat of our emotions. That's kind of like when a really awesome song comes on, memories from Bette Midler, whatever, right? And we can just go right back into that awesome feeling of our childhood or whatever. That also dictates our habits. It also dictates our decision making. So with that, we have, sorry, I'm really having some issues here technically. Our human, right? The neocortex, our prefrontal cortex. That's language, that's abstract thought, that's imagination, that's our consciousness. That that you're here and it's 7:22 on a Tuesday night. We're a part of this really awesome program. And that's our rationalization brain. So just as which part do you think is the part that's the 4 times as likely to go into doubt or worry or fear? Is it the lizard brain? Is it the mammalian brain or our human brain? So for those of you who are probably guessing, it's the lizard brain. So Here's how it takes place in marketing. And I found this really, really cool. Everything that they're doing in marketing is targeting this. Everything they're doing with news is targeting this. We're being bombarded 24/7, social media, through this process. Get their attention. Hey, you, are you worried? Are you freaking out? Whatever it is. Do you want to solve the problem? Stimulate desire. And here's all the proof and the data of why you should make this decision one way or the other. This is why we're right. This is why you're wrong. This is part of that process that we're constantly funneling through on a daily basis, where our nervous system is trying to process and make sense of and survive. Because everything at the end of the day is about our survival instinct, which is, again, our reptilian brain. So again, here's another example of all of that. You got your reptilian brain. It's mostly unconscious, survival instinct, fight, flight, fleeing, and reproducing, the 4 basic human instances: hunger, breathing, heart rates, all of that primitive stuff. Then our mammalian brain is emotions. So again, that timelessness. That's why we can think back to something from 5, 10, 15, 20, 30 years ago, 40 years ago, and it's that memory feels exactly like we're there. It's timeless. And then our rational brain is our executive decision. So that's just another way of looking at everything and from that paradigm. And then we have this left brain, right brain, and some of you might be familiar with this. Our left brain is that more academic expression, detail-oriented. It's logical, it's analytical, uses logic and rules. And then we have our right brain, the creative and, big picture and more holistic and philosophy, spiritualism, kind of, you can get it. You feel more than you think more. And some of you will kind of, by looking at this list, will kind of identify, are you more of a left brain or right brain default person? Neither one is more right than the other. It's just a tool. So I love this. This kind of explains everything we're going through. And for those of you who have ever seen the movie The Matrix, this is kind of a cool representation of, are we in reality? Is this not a reality? Olam haba, olam hazeh, is this the real world? Is there a next world to come? All these different things. But our emotional reality. So we start off with our thoughts. Kind of hungry. I'm in the mood for a pizza. And then we have a feeling. Well, the place we went last time wasn't so great. I didn't like how they made it. So then that makes us decide on an action. Well, I could go back there, but I'm going to try something different. And then you try that new place. You're like, oh, that's better than the other place. And those beliefs then rotate all the way back around and inform your thoughts the next time you are trying to do something. And that can work proactively. In other words, moving us forward into a positive way, or this can pull us into a negative way if we get stuck in what we would call a feedback loop or a stress loop, which is all what we're talking about tonight. So let's take it to a step further. And Luna, I can't see the question, so if there's anything coming up, please feel free to jump in. So everything we're dealing with in our reality, right? It's whatever date it is today, it's October 12th, are considered by our brain and our experience considered to be emotional reality. So I remember in graduate school when they said, well, if you had a client that said, and aliens took me and they took me aboard the ship, don't automatically assume they're crazy. Ask the meaning about it. Why do you think they took you? What did you learn? Even though that kind of sounds crazy, and we're like, our first assumption is going to be like, well, now we know kind of aliens are, I think that was all released by the government, right? So whatever that is going on in that. But it's emotional reality. We create our beliefs through our thoughts, our feelings, our actions, and our beliefs. TFAB. That's what every single decision and every single action we make comes from. Whether it happened in real time or we added something in. So for an example, when I started doing this work with kinesiology or muscle testing, I actually was working with 2 twins. And we were trying to index for time, which I'm going to get to later, about when a trauma originally happened. And I had them in 2 different rooms. One of the twins said, oh, this happened when we were 5. And the other one said, wait a second, this happened when we were 6. And when I put them back together, their family members like, no, don't you remember? We lived here at this age. And the one who was a year off that said at 6 and 5 was like, oh, I thought we moved there at 3, not 4. So they were both right. It was just their indexing for time based on their personal emotional reality very much proves this. right? And I'm sure many of you have had that, like, oh, was it 5? Was it 7? But it feels like it was 5 and it wasn't, but it turns out it was 7. That's all of this emotional reality. And again, remember, this can propel you forward or this can keep you stuck in a stress pattern. So, experiment or experience number 3 tonight. I want everybody to imagine that there's a lemon right in front of you. Or if you didn't throw away your etrog yet. So I want you to cut that lemon open and I want you to slice it. And I want you to take a wedge. I want you to kind of hold it up in front of you. Literally, take your hands, hold it up in front of you as if there's an imaginary lemon wedge in front of you. I want you to take a whiff. Can you smell it? Can you get a little bit of that faint taste of lemon? Can you smell that citrusy note? Now I want you to take a small little bite, just enough to get those juices going. Take a little bit of a bite. And another little bite. Just start chewing. You feel it? You feel it back here in the jaw? You're starting to salivate a little bit. And I can only see a few people on the screen, Luna, so I don't know if there's other people nodding their heads, but, those you are getting it, right? There's no lemon in front of us, but yet we're having a physiological response to a memory because it's been stored in our nervous system, and we're going back into that mammalian brain and recalling that memory as if it's here right now. So when I heard this following statement that's on the bottom of the screen, this blew my mind. I'm trained in the world of psychology and therapy. And of course I went to, therapy my whole life as a kid. Emotions are not just psychological, but they're physiological. And the world that we're playing in has been kind of separated us from the neck up and the body down. And as a mind-body specialist, there's no mind, there's no body. It's mind-body. It's all one. And if we look at what's going on in our nervous system, as well as not just what our narrative, our rational brain is trying to tell us, which we're just telling a story based on our understanding and our experience and trying to find the word for it, it's very hard to tap into how do we succeed and how do we minimize our stressors. So let's get into this a little bit of the physiology of stress. We already said this. They're all considered to be emotional reality, and they may not correspond with actual history. So we got this awesome, brilliant professor. I'm sure you all are familiar with that side profile. That's Rabbi Dr. Homer Simpson. And, a lot of time, if you remember, he's usually thinking about 2 things in The Simpsons. It's beer and donuts. And, right? But 90% of all of our information that comes to our brain is visual. 90%. We're intaking that like a supercomputer. And 36,000 visual messages per hour is received by the brain. It's a lot of stuff. So when we're talking about like, oh my God, I'm so exhausted at the end of the day, unless we're fueling ourselves right with the right nutrition, all the omega fatty acids and staying off all the chazarai, all the junk food, right? We're not going to be able to power our bodies the right way because our brain alone is just working like this. And then how do we filter positive versus negative stressors? So just this one, like 90% of all information comes to our brain as visual and 36,000 messages per hour. So this is a really cool thing if this is going to work. Just want to show you a little bit of what's going on in brain thoughts. So you can see these are neural synapses, and you can see this is neural connections in our brain as they're making a new connection with thoughts, memories, feelings, traumas, learning new information. It's kind of like when my brain hurts when you're trying to learn something new. This is what's actually going on in your neural pathways. And you have all those different strands clicking together to create a memory, where they're evolving, or they're learning new skills. When you have multiple memories and multiple experiences clicking together, that's a neural network. And that's the fabric of our experience and our memory. So these neural networks are constantly happening while we're experiencing things. And it's either, again, we're going to approach or avoid, right? That whole fight or flight paradigm, whether this is something I want to come close to or something I want to run away from. It's something I want to experience more of or something that I don't want to deal with. And sometimes we make those choices in our life of like experiencing the things we don't want. In the law of attraction world, they talk about, don't tell me about the things you don't want. Tell me about the things you do want without telling me what you don't want. And if you put more attention on the things you want, you'll get that, right? Because your neurology is literally, that image that we saw, those videos we saw, is literally your neurology changing to create that emotional reality. So we talked a little bit before about all of these things coming back from all different pathways and all different traditions. And let's just take a look about how stress gets looked at from the 5-element or Chinese medicine perspective. Acupuncture and herbs, but really the Chinese medicine. So it looks at the whole body health from a systemic approach. And a few minutes ago, I talked about how, in the therapy world or the modern medicine world or the medical model, we separated the neck from the head. We separated the emotions from the body. And that's kind of why in the medical world, we have you have your podiatrist and your gastro and your whatever, right? And they kind of have to hopefully talk to each other to actually help you. But you may have something going on in your ankle that's actually coming from your low back, but you got to see a different doctor from that. But in the systemic world, my training as a therapist is systemic. It's whole systems. It's not just what's going on inside the person, but the relational dynamics to their meanings and beliefs around them. Very much in alignment with the Chinese medicine paradigm. So it's looking at everything from that systemic approach. And they use something called Meridian Pathways and this 5-element theory. So the Meridian Pathways, this is kind of cool. Those of you who are familiar with acupuncture, these are all the different, each color represents a different pathway. And if you see some of the colors there, some of them have the same, they're similar. And what we would say, like in my world, that we would put some of those together even more, which I'm going to get to in a moment, but these are each individual of the pathways, but we would start combining them to start looking at a whole system. Which one is affecting the other? Which one is having a dominant challenge and which one is the flow down, right? It's basically negatively flowing or it's blocked, so it's affecting something else. So it's a giant web linking different parts of our body together. It's a comprehensive map, vital energy, chi, life force, and the meridian system explains how we live and why we become sick. And then we have the 5 elements. They started combining a few of those meridians together to create this element. So wood is connected to liver and gallbladder, fire meridian, heart, your small intestine, sympathetic and nervous system, reproductive organs, thyroid. Earth is stomach and spleen, all of your digestive stuff. Then your metal is lungs, colon, some skin stuff. So interesting, those who have like skin sensitivities and allergies, or they start breaking out with seborrheic dermatitis, stuff like that. A lot of times if you go to, an allergist, like, well, let's put a cream on it. But actually in that integrative medicine model, they'll start looking at digestion and figuring out what's going on there in your stomach because it's showing up on your skin. And then you have the water meridian, which is kidney, bladder, your endocrine system, and so forth. And you can see around each one, there's a little bit of, themes that are there. So the wood, liver, gallbladder, flexibility and growth, planning, organization, vision. Fire is about relationships and love, right? Reproductive and heart are connected to it. Earth is about nourishment, contentment, stability, empathy, care, being grounded, being rooted. Metal, receptivity, solving all internal conflict, the ability to let go. And then water meridian, energy, movement and flow. What's that expression like? Oh, I was so, someone frightens you and you're like, oh, I was so afraid I almost pissed myself, right? It's water meridian. Fear and water are connected in the water meridian, and that's the bladder. So let's jump a little bit and we're going to come back to that. So what's stress? Stress simply means that it's the body's non-specific response to any extra demand that we can't handle. And again, if we're eating good food, we're meditating, we're doing all the things we can do, we're going to have a higher adaptability to stress. But stress can come in not just from the people in our lives or what we're experiencing or watching or whatever it may be. It can come from toxins. It can come from chemicals. It can come from junk food. It can come from the air that we drink, the air that we breathe, the water that we're drinking. Too many hours in front of the computer, right? Especially now that we're all on Zoom and we're all getting our eyes really tired. Infections such as flu and viruses and bacterial stuff, right? We're all stressed out from that stuff going on, and it can affect our digestion or inflammation, right? Inflammation is the number one thing that causes all this, and then improper or excessive exercise. So this is how it breaks down. This is stress. You have your sympathetic. Think about this in as if you're sitting in a car and the side to the left is hitting the gas pedal and just flooring it and putting your foot down all the way on the gas pedal. Sympathetic nervous system. Your pupils expand, fast and shallow breaths, heart pumps faster, all the extremities, right? The blood goes internal away from the extremities. That's sympathetic stress. That's kind of like what we're constantly under day in and day out when we need to accomplish stuff. And the other side is hitting the brake, your parasympathetic side. So your pupils shrink, you start relaxing, slow down with your talking, more intentional. Your heart rate comes down, digestive juices start flowing. This is why, they say don't eat when you're standing up and don't eat when you're rushing, and chew as many times as you can before you swallow. It's all connected. So we did the lemon test, and our body's stress response works in a similar way when triggered with unresolved memories, right? So for most of us, I've never met anybody that had a negative, oh my God, I hate lemons. I have this childhood trauma. We haven't, I'm sure there might be someone out there, but thankfully that's been a pretty neutral situation, right? So, but our negative stress response works exactly the same way. It creates that physiological, as if you're in that moment, you can taste it, you can smell it, you can feel it throughout your body in multiple places. So, as I like to joke, you can have a pain in your tuchus from someone who's a pain in your tuchus. It can show up anywhere. And we talk about psychosomatic, right? If you go around from, I don't know why I have this pain, I don't know. And the doctor is like, well, it's just psychosomatic. Yes, it is. Psycho in your brain, the neurology, your brain, soma in your body, your neurology or your nervous system is affecting your brain. So a lot of times, unfortunately, it's been used as a negative connotation. Oh, you need a therapist. But really what that's saying is that they don't understand that they've disconnected the mind up and the body down, and they don't see the whole picture. So your physiological memory cannot determine if a stressor is happening now or 5 years ago. If there's some type of remnant or similarity, symbolism, metaphorical, and will act just like it did during that moment of stress. So you could be traveling and all of a sudden you get really stressed out about something and you don't know why. And it could just be like, oh, there was a sign like that when I was a kid. And maybe right after seeing that sign, 10 minutes later, your family got into a car accident. Right? Your memory, it's literally a supercomputer. And what was that Prego marinara sauce? What was their ad line for Prego marinara sauce? It's in there. Our brains and our nervous system is like that. So it isn't all in your head. And again, as we said before, they're not just psychological, but they're also physical. So for those of you who love reading and you want a really awesome book, Dr. Candace Pert wrote this book called Molecules of Emotion. It's the science behind mind-body medicine and really cool stuff in there. And she was the person who found that our neuropeptides of our DNA, there was biochemical responses in our body that travel throughout our entire body, actually carry emotional storage. So when I was saying a few minutes ago that you can have a pain in your tuchus from someone who's a pain in your tuchus, that's literally true. And she wrote this, as our feelings change, the mixture of peptides travel throughout your body and your brain, and they're literally changing the chemistry of every cell in your body. So I had a client a bunch of years ago that had a really bad trauma, and she came in. I remember she was coming in with a sling. And after we dealt with the trauma, I'm like, listen, I know you've been coming in with the sling, and I know you've done rehab and orthopedic surgery. It's been 2 years, right? What's going on? And so we threw this modality that I'm going to share with you in a few minutes. And the crazy thing is we found the emotional stressor that her body was carrying, her nervous system was carrying. And at the beginning of it, her arm range of motion would go to here, literally. And that was it. It was restricted and limited. And within 10 minutes of using the modality neuro-emotional technique, she had full range of motion, and she threw the sling in the garbage the next day. This was a couple years ago. But for 2 years, she was suffering because there was a somatic stressor where it got trapped in her body that somehow did not allow her to move her arm fully. So many of these stressful events today remind us of unresolved past traumatic events subconsciously. So this leads to a recurring stress pattern, right? And when something is generally similar to an unresolved stress from our past, we can have a response to that. So that's why I'm kind of wondering like why we have food aversions or, we don't like certain things, even if we've never tried it. I remember like I was at a wedding in LA for one of my friends and there was this thing of sushi and I'm like, oh, that's gross. This was before sushi was super cool and it was LA and sushi was already cool there. And I remember I'm like looking at it and I'm like, oh, I guess I have to try it. I'm in Los Angeles. And I picked one of them. Clearly I picked the wrong one because I picked the cone roll where they shove everything in there. And I'm like, oh, this is awful. I'm never having sushi again. And that was it, right? I made a rule based on that one negative experience because I'm like, ugh, it's gross and the seaweed tastes funky. Anyway, years later, I started eating seaweed and then I actually had a nori sushi roll, right? The wrap sushi roll. I'm like, oh my God, this is amazing. I can have 400,000 rolls of this. But I had to be willing to get past that recurring stress pattern, that belief, that thought, that feeling, that action, that belief that created my emotional reality around sushi. And we have this about everything, about friends, about family, about money, about jobs, about relationships, about what's going on in the world right now. And that can lead to ongoing chronic stress patterns that surface both as mind and body symptoms. Everybody with me so far? Luna, is there any questions?
No, not yet.
All right. I'm trying to give everybody neuroscience and alternative medicine and stress all in one quick shot. So I apologize if I'm it's kind of like drinking water from a fire hose. So we're going to go into another technique in a moment. So what you see in front of you, and I'll explain this in a moment, is called the First Aid Stress Tool. And you can see on the bottom, if you guys want to go to my website and you want a printout of this with directions and a video more in detail, that'll be there. It's at thefamilyroom.sfl.com/FAST. But this is right. You can see in the middle, the hand with the Chinese medicine meridian points. So if you've ever worked with an acupuncturist or an herbalist, they're actually feeling your pulse points to see where you need some attention in your body. And you don't necessarily need to know what's going on when we're going to do this intervention, but it's going to be really cool in a minute. We're going to get back to that. So let's talk about some self-help to relieve symptoms that are associated with mind-body stress, because that's my big goal for tonight. I want you to walk away with at least one tangible thing that you can use that will help minimize some of the stressors in your life that has changed my life, because I shared that I had all these crazy panic attacks that went away within 3 sessions, and stuff that you can do in between, whether you work with a therapist, whether you're doing meditation or yoga or whatever, or not doing, right, whatever, that this can help. So this helps change a conditioned response, and this comes from the world of neuro-emotional technique. And again, it eliminates specific patterns so it doesn't have to continue experiencing a reaction to the same circumstances. So here's what I'm going to have you do. I don't want anybody freaking out, and I'm not playing therapist. I'm done for the day. But pick an issue that's kind of been annoying you, not pissing you off, not driving you crazy, but between a 1 and a 5 of annoyance. Not a 6, not a 7, not an 8, not a 9, not a 10. But somewhere that's like, all right, it's bothersome. It's not ruining my day, but I'd rather not be. Right? And what I want you to do is, now that you pick something in that, halfway annoying rate, I want you to rate it now from a 1 to 10. When you just think about that, separate from anything else, is it really a 10? Is it really a 5? Is it really a 1? 10 being obviously the most. Everybody got that number? So here's what you're going to do. It doesn't matter if you want to start with your left or your right when you're doing this without me, but everybody hold your hands out in front of you. You don't have to hold it all the way up. You can just kind of hold it out in front of you. I'm going to roll back a little bit. Hopefully y'all can still hear me. And we're going to do this just for the sake of everybody doing it in uniform together. We're going to hook our left hand under our right hand as if you're playing guitar on the neck of your hand, but you're going to your pulse, as if you're feeling your pulse points. So you're really between the bone and the fleshy point, and the cartilage. You're in the fleshy point. You can see in that third picture right there. And you're not pushing hard, and you're hooking under. I'm just showing this way for the sake of, from the flex of your wrist, you're in between that soft point. 1, 2, 3. But you're hooking under like this. Okay? That's step 1. Right? So really step 1 is, what's the distressing thought that I'm having? And let's rate it. So we did that. Step 2 is hook under, if you want to start again left to right, since we'll be together. Step 3, put your hand on your forehead. These are called the hypothalamus, or emotional points. But I know most of us are also used to putting our hand on this point, covering our eyes, and kind of on our forehead, on our kepi, for a specific prayer called the Shema. So go figure, there's some overlapping there. The emotion points. And I want you to relax. And if you have a desk in front of you, you can put your elbows on your desk. If you want to lean over onto your knees and get all the way comfortable, or if you just want to sit up, just kind of drop your elbows down, but hold on to those points. Take about 10, 15 seconds. Just hold on to that thought. Don't fix it. Don't change it. Just breathe right through it. In through your nose, out through your mouth. Holding on to that thought again. Don't fix it. Don't change it. Just notice that thought. Notice where you feel it in your mind and body. And just breathe. In through your nose, out through your mouth. Don't fix it. Don't change it. Don't wrestle with it. And when you're ready, if you want to stay on there a few more seconds while I'm giving directions, you're going to then unhook and then flip your hand and do it on the other side. So now you're going to hook your right hand onto your left. And from the flex of your wrist, you can see in the picture, 1, 2, and 3. And then connect back up to your emotion points. Get back into that comfortable position, whatever worked for you. Nice, slow, deep breaths in through your nose and out through your mouth. Let's take another 15 or 20 seconds. Don't try to fix it. Don't try to change it. Just breathe as if you're breathing right through it. And when you're ready, allow yourself comfortably to relax your hands and slowly sit back up, slowly, slowly. Anybody want to give a quick 15 to 20 second share of what they noticed and if it's switched and kind of diminished for them? And Luna, you'll kind of moderate that. Does anybody want to be awesomely brave and share? You don't have to share what your thought was, but you can say, well, it started off as an 8 and it went down to a 4 or it completely disappeared. Did anybody have an experience like that? Don't be shy. Okay. What I find is that when you try this over and over again throughout the day, don't do it while you're driving and at the stoplight, but I actually taught this years ago. I think it was when I was a youth director at a synagogue and one of my youth group kids was having like awful sleep. And I taught this to them at the end of services. And when I saw them the next day, I'm like, how was your sleep? They're like, I don't know. I passed out in the middle of doing this technique. So it helped. So if you try this multiple times throughout the day and you try this consistently, remember, so we are hitting each of those points, right? Yeah. On the left hand, you have the fire, the water, the wood, and the water. And the right hand, you have metal, earth, and fire. So you don't need, and don't worry about the fact that there's 2 on the fire is on both hands. It's just different organs. But when you do this over and over again, you don't need to know exactly what you're feeling and the meaning behind it. You can just tap into all of the meridians and it kind of rebalances the mind and body with your breathing. It really does sync everything up. So where does this come from? This comes from neuro-emotional technique. And this thing blew my mind. And I remember going to a chiropractor years ago and he was working with a friend of mine and they're like, oh, you have this issue in your back because, you hurt your coccyx bone. And we're like, that's crazy. Like, how did you know that? And the person's like, I don't remember this. And they kind of indexed for time. They're like, oh, you were probably, I think around whatever, 10 years old when this happened. And they were doing this through something called kinesiology or neurological muscle testing. And my friend literally picked up the phone and called their mother in the middle of the session, like, what happened when I was like such and such years old? And the mom literally on speakerphone goes, don't you remember? We were sledding and you fell off the sled and you hurt your tush. And this chiropractor, through this neurological muscle testing connected to that point, knew that there was some type of trauma that was stored there that caused this pain point. So NET originally came out of chiropractic, where they found that like when people are going over and over again for injuries, like what's going on? Why isn't the nervous system catching and resetting? And Dr. Walker heard a presentation. The guy who founded this, Dr. Scott Walker, heard this presentation from a woman named Dr. Jennifer LaMonica, who, while she was adjusting her chiropractic patients for car accidents, had them think about the exact moment the car accident happened. And while she adjusted them, did that. And she found that their amount of time under treatment reduced massively. So Dr. Walker's like, okay, that's kind of cool. I've been kind of looking for something that can take it a bit deeper. What can I do with this? And that's when he started learning this field of applied kinesiology, which takes the Chinese medicine meridians with the body organs and stress and muscle testing, and started creating this modality. So when I first saw this, I was super ridiculously skeptical. This is like woo-woo. My family are all medical doctors. I don't even want to bother trying explaining this to them. My great uncle is like psychiatrist for the last 60 years. And like, how do I even bother explaining this to him? And when I started doing this modality, Jefferson Medical School in Philadelphia, Jefferson University, started doing some research on this. And they started doing this with post-traumatic stress disorder for those who survived cancer, but were still having continued negative emotional experiences. So what they would do is obviously they had, they were, thank God, survived. And they took all these pre-tests and ratings, and they did a brain scan of what was happening in their brain when they retold the narrative. They basically had it written out, and they told over one of the therapists, and they played the story of them telling the moment that they got diagnosed with cancer while they were in a functional MRI. And they did like 20, 30, 40 people. I can't remember exactly how many people were in the study. And they mapped each brain previous. Then they did 5 or so NET sessions, neuroemotional technique sessions, and then redid the exact same thing. They also, previous to that, were working with, there was a really cool video I got taken down somehow on the internet, where one of my colleagues was working with a military vet who unfortunately had his limb blown off in the war. So that phantom limb syndrome, where you would actually feel like you still have that body part. And through NET, was able to remove the pain and the trauma. It was opioids and drug addiction. I mean, he was just a train wreck, like unfortunately ready to take his own life. And through this modality was able to heal all this stuff. Right? Like I shared, I had multiple panic attacks a day. And then within 3 sessions, it got rid of my panic attacks. So, what was that Hair Club for Men? Not only am I the founder, I'm also a user, right? Not only am I a practitioner of this, this also changed my life. So this is the brain scan. On the left, you can see where the cross section is. All of the areas in the brain, that's the same overlapping brains of all the brain scans. And they all lit up in those same areas. You can see kind of that middle right area. That's the parahippocampus, and that was activated during a stress induction. In other words, our brain naturally is going to look like that. When we have a chronic stressor, all of our brains is going to look like that. That's the area that it's typically going to light up. After 5 sessions or so, 3 to 5 sessions, you can look at the right. There's nothing lighting up in there. You can see there's a little bit of left, a little bit of yellow, but that's after 5 sessions. And here's a cross section. The top half again is it's from the back to the front, and then the side. You can see those areas lighting up all the way in the front right and the back of the brainstem. And in the bottom, you can see after those 5 sessions. So neurology is proving this. Dr. Andrew Newberg, who was over at Penn Medical, if you guys are interested in like a subject called neurotheology, he's the jam. So he created a field called neurotheology. What happens to your brain and body during religious and spiritual experiences? One of the books he wrote is Our Brains Hardwired for God? He was doing all these brain studies. The really cool thing was, but after this was published in the Journal of Cancer Survivorship, it wasn't until a few years ago, he never even got an NET treatment. It was completely no bias. He didn't even get an NET treatment while doing the studies on this. So really, really, really no bias going into this. He was just looking at brain scans, and he's one of the top neurological imaging specialists in the world. If you go to his website, I think it's drandrewnewberg.com. There's some really, 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 really cool articles besides his books that are there. And then we'll talk. All of these people have been on my podcast. And Dr. Dan Monti, who's the chair of the integrative medicine department, was the person. He's a psychiatrist, an MD psychiatrist and facilitator of NET. He was the person who was leading all these studies. So let's go back into the emotions for a second, because this is really this is my jam. This is what makes me so excited about all of this. And what you were doing when you were doing the first aid stress tool, this is what you were tapping into, but you didn't really know this. you're really tapping into the acupuncture organ emotional relationships. So on the left side, going down the full left side, you have the different body organs. And each of them are categorized by a different color connected to a different meridian. Remember, we talked about the 5 elements in the meridian system? So we have the earth meridian, or the earth element, which is stomach and spleen, and that's connected to oversympathy, low self-esteem, lack of control. And everybody kind of has their own predisposed element as a primary personality trait. And we get to work on that. And this is kind of a lens into how we can look at ourselves and what we need to work on about ourselves, or how we handle stress. Which one of these do we go automatically to in a time of stress? We go into doubting ourselves and feeling bad for ourselves and nervousness and lack of control and distrust, which there's a lot of right now. So that's earth element. We're going to have a lot of digestive issues probably. Can't stomach what's going on in the world. Or do you know one of those people, or are you one of those people that's walking around and going, I, you know those people, just cracking away. That's the middle disposition. It's large intestine and lung. That's grief. That's sadness. That's just like stuck, right? Just feel awful. So that's that earth meridian. That metal meridian. And then we were talking before about bladder, kidney, and the water meridian. It's feeling stuck, not knowing what to do. Do I do this? Do I do that? Right? Do I get the vaccine? Do I not get the vaccine? Right? That's bladder meridian. Water. Paralyzed will, feeling stuck. And then we get into holding on to stuff, not letting go. Gallbladder, liver, right? And when we don't create bile and we don't process things out, right? We talk about when you have the emotion of feeling bile, right? Really anger, that's gallbladder, liver. It creates bile to process out the negative toxins in our body. So that's feeling stubborn, holding on to stuff, not letting go. So that's the wood meridian, kind of planting yourself into the ground, very stubborn, like a tree. You're not moving. And then the fire meridian, in a way, kind of encapsulates everything, but it's really cool because you can see it's heart, thyroid, adrenals, reproductive organs, pituitary gland. But that's feeling of lost, at risk, kind of that Pollyannish, like everything's going to be great. But on the inside, you're like really freaking out, not sure what to do. The feeling of like, oh my God, I hope I'm not left behind. Any insecurities. Feeling really depleted. So that's the fire, right when your fire is put out. So it can be used, right, to amplify. I know what I'm going to do. I'm not, right, everything's going to be okay. This is going to work out for me. I know my decision. I know exactly what I need to do, right? That's the opposite of the first 5 on the left-hand side. And if you can see the left-hand column in the bigger bold, those are 90%ers. That's what Dr. Walker calls them. 90% of the time, those are the first emotions that we're going to go through. And then we'll typically, have the other ones.
So Justin, we have a few questions in the chat.
Sure.
And our first one is from Esther Shoshana, and she asks, how does this work if you're missing some organs, like thyroid, etc.?
Cool. So right, remember we have the Meridian Pathways. There's right, and it's an energetic system. So one of the reasons why they say that some of our organs start to fail is because that energy going through the system itself is not feeding the actual organ. So you can look at it as a physical paradigm. Well, if we looked at the meridian chart as a physical, like what's flowing into it, right? And if you see here on this chart, is the organ that's connected to that, is it directly where the issue is coming from, or is it coming from the circle around is what they call the Shen cycle, the creative cycle, and the destructive cycle, which is the middle cycle where it diminishes, is called the co-cycle in Chinese medicine. So it could be from where it is. So I've worked with people and like, I'm having these issues and it's really not coming from there. And we figure out by process of elimination using this neurological muscle test to figure out where's it starting from and flowing in. And it will show up in our organs certain way. So a lot of times, right, that's the thing, again, where we're talking about systemic versus separating all the different parts of our mind and our body where they only look at one thing, but we don't know it's connected to something else. And that's the beauty of the Eastern versus Western, or what we would like to say, like molding them together, the integrative model of Eastern and Western. So I hope that answers the question.
And we have one other about migraines.
Yeah. Is there a question about migraines, or is it just what do we do about migraines?
Julie, feel free to jump in. Julie just asked about migraines, question mark.
Yeah. So go on. I
Yeah,
can't.
just trying to figure out. I don't really see the body system listed. I mean, looking under nervous system, if you're going to link it that way, then under fire, but just trying to see where that would fit in your
Yeah.
paradigm.
Well, so remember, anything can come from anywhere at any time. So, the way we look at it is it from an external source, a toxin from outside of us? Right. Most of us, I'm assuming, are here. We live in South Florida. So the amount of mold toxicity we're exposed to on a daily basis is massive. So that can range from everything from digestive to headaches to sinus to chronic congestion. I was in Arizona and Sedona. I was like, oh my God, I'm able to breathe for the first time because there was no humidity and there was no mold. Right. So those of us who chronically have sinus, I don't know if any of you are like me. I don't know if this is just a Wasser thing. My sister and I have this. We can tell when it's going to rain before it's going to rain in our sinuses. Some people get it in their bones. We get it in our sinuses, right? That can turn into a migraine, but it's where is that coming from? What is the, connected to that organ system or that predisposition that's giving us, where's that stuck? And migraines can be from a cervical issue, right? If you need if you have a subluxation chiropractically. So when I'm looking at things, I don't have this image on here for the sake of time, but imagine a baseball field and, you have the pitcher's mound and then you have the four bases. So when I'm working with someone, we'll put something on the pitcher's mound and we'll go, either systemically or issue by issue, but let's say it's a migraine, right? We'll use that as an example and I'll run the bases. What I mean by that is first base, we're going to look at emotions and I'll either use talk therapy or neuroemotional technique to help solve that. Second base is toxins. What toxins have you been exposed to that your body's not processing it out? Is it something that you ate? Is it something that you drank? Is it something that you're using in your detergent? Is it your everything, right? Is it shaving cream? Is it dairy that you're eating and your body's not processing it out? And therefore that's causing a buildup of chi stagnation, right? And causing other issues. And then the third base would be nutrition. Do you have a nutritional deficiency? So one of the interesting research, just for the sake of adding extra value, is vitamin D. We all live in South Florida and we all think we have enough vitamin D. And there's been tons of incredible research over the last year and a half that if you have a vitamin D below 40, you're 50% likely to have a more challenging, God forbid, if you have an exposure to what's going on right now, you have a 50% higher chance of a more difficult experience than those who actually have a functional medicine level of 60 to 80 with their vitamin D. So for years, all of our doctors saying, no, vitamin D is great, but it's actually a hormone and it's also a vitamin. But we're talking about one of the things for autoimmune and protective is vitamin D. And we think we live in Florida and we're getting enough because we're around. We're actually not. So one of the things I can't stress enough is making sure you get your vitamin D checked and getting them somewhere between the 60 to 80 range. And even though some doctors are like, that's really high and it's 30 and 40, you're fine. I'm happy to send you the clinical research on that if you want to track me down. And right, mine went from 33, 34 to 87 throughout the last 6 months or 7 months. So I hope that handles the headache. Lunazer, looks like there was another question that came in.
I think that's it for our questions, but we are getting over time.
Yeah.
So I'd like for us to start wrapping up.
Absolutely. So the one thing, again, I want everybody to take away is, is this our stress patterns can really be changed and really in a matter of minutes. That first aid stress tool is a powerful, powerful, powerful technique. We don't have to put our attention to all these things that are going on. We can choose to put our focus on the news. We can choose not to put our focus on the news. We can choose to watch certain TV shows that drive us crazy, or we can watch Ted Lasso, which is worth $4.99 a month on Apple TV to watch that awesome, uplifting mindset show, right? We can decide where we put our time, effort, and energy. And I know that, we have such amazing things going on. We have this beautiful program that, that they're hosting for us tonight, and there's going to be more things going on, and the power of community. Just like our body is a system, we have to keep together as a community and keep supporting each other. And if you want to hear more about this, I actually have a podcast for those of you who are into podcasts. It's called You Winning Life. It's on all platforms. And there's a few interviews about psychology and entrepreneurship and alternative medicine and and mindset, but Dr. Walker, the founder of this, was one of the episodes. Dr. Monty, the chair of integrative medicine at Jefferson, who's doing the research. Dr. Newberg has been on it. So if those of you who want to hear more about the mind-body science from that perspective, there's that, and there's stuff on integrative nutrition, and Howard Behar from Starbucks. There's Howard Schultz, who founded Starbucks, and there's Howard Behar, who's the former international president. If you ever had a Frappuccino, you can thank him. He's the guy who basically helped Starbucks expand. So I've had some really cool people. And if you want that first aid stress tool, again, it's on my website, the Family Room SFL, samfranklarry.com/FAST, or if you go to my homepage, it's on the bottom. But I really do want to thank you. Hope there was a little something for everybody.
Thank you so much, Jason. This is wonderful. And I also want to thank tonight's co-sponsor, the Greater Miami Jewish Federation. Tonight's program was the first in our fall Be Well series. And I want to invite everyone to join us on November 2nd. I just dropped the link in the chat. We'll have the next event in this series. It's called War, Poetry, and Theater with Combat Hippies. And it'll feature Anthony Torres. He's the executive director of Combat Hippies. It's an ensemble of Puerto Rican military veteran performing artists who use their trauma to create art programs. So I've just dropped the information into the chat. And thanks again, everyone, for joining us.